Good evening. Welcome in daily UPSC editorial audio program. North South real gaps false binary. The Economic Times. India's growing neighborhood alignments. India's growing neighborhood dilemmas. The Hindu. Now the full editorial. North South real gaps false binary. The Economic Times. Rural urban political differences more likely. The key to southern India's superior economic performance has been its relative success with population control. It is also the cause of the region's deepest fears over losing economic and political weight due to fiscal and electoral system based on population. The southern states lead in almost all economic and development metrics because of a common market for their industrial good as well as supply of cheap labor from the agrarian north. To that extent, they are comfortable with a stronger federal structure that taxes uniformly and improves infrastructure to allow business to acquire national scale. But these strengthening tendencies accompany bigger transfer of resources to poorer northern states and would give them a larger political voice when uh, constituency delimitation is resumed after a half century hiatus. Both processes are a constitutional requirement. Some of the South's variance is misplaced urbanization lead to the same effect of increased economic combined with political marginalization, and the north is urbanizing faster than the south, in part because of a low base since migration is overwhelmingly interstate. The model of economic development is becoming geographically diversified. The factors contributing to a common market are also driving urbanization. Constituency delimitation with a third of India's people living in cities will heighten rural-urban political differences rather than a north-south divide. It would be in the interest of the southern states to push their economic advantage to pull up and northern laggards. India's federal structure has been alive to the former's cultural and political concern, and that has resulted in their overachievement. They are now free to export their development model. Growth rates among the states are expected to even out with greater market integration domestically and with the rest of the world. This would de-emphasize culture specific model success at select points of a nation's economic development. India's growing neighborhood dilemmas. The Hindu. Most South Asian states are skeptical of India's primacy in their own ways. Happy Mon Jacob teaches at the uh, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and is the founder of the Council for Strategic and Defense Research. The proverbial Achilles heel of Indian foreign policy continues to be its neighborhood. Contemporary Indian foreign policy has an ambitious vision for being the leader of the global south, to be an arbiter in global geopolitical contestations, to make a serious claim to be a pole in world politics. But South Asia is not only not keen to jump on the uh, bandwagon of the India story, but it is also seemingly holding India back, albeit indirectly. Neighborhoods are difficult for any major power, but contemporary India is faced with an exceptionally hard one, complicated by a rising superpower in its neighborhood for the first time in its history. New Delhi's dilemmas the causes. In general, there are three types of dilemmas that faces in the neighborhood. One, the rise of politically anti-India regime in South Asia, such as the one in the Maldives, where The new government is effectively asking Indians to pack up and leave, while the Maldives is anti-India in an instrumental sense. A Khaleda Zia-led government in Dhaka, which goes to the elections early next year, could turn out to be ideologically anti-India. The second type of dilemma India faces in the neighborhood is structural, resulting from Beijing's growing influence in South Asia. Three things stand out: the growing inten- entanglement of the region's smaller states in the Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) and other Chinese projects. Beijing's assiduous outreach to South Asian states when the rest of the international community abandons or avoids them for normative or other reasons, as was the case with Taliban-led Afghanistan, military ruled Myanmar, and crisis hit Sri Lanka. India does too, but the overall impact of China's outreach is far higher than that of India, primarily as a function of deeper pockets. Finally, China's desire to settle border dispute with its neighbors, minus India, as seen in the case of Bhutan, is also a strategy to win over the region. The net result, or one that could potentially develop over time, is somewhat alarming. If we do not take innovative measures, there is a good chance that we will be geopolitically locked in within an unfriendly South Asia. This may be a case of overstating the point, but is to lay emphasis on a potential future scenario. There are three broad sets of causes behind the dilemmas India faces in the neighborhood. The first is the regional geopolitical architecture characterized by five overlapping elements. Contemporary South Asia is characterized by a diminishing presence of the South States, of diminishing presence of the United States, which for a long time was a geopolitical concern in the region. For New Delhi, Washington's presence in South Asia was not always advantageous, but its departure is definitely disadvantageous. In particular, given how China has filled the power vacuum created by Washington's departure, the aggressive and stupendous rise of China has come as a geopolitical buffer, at least for now, for a smaller states in the region which have become adept at using the China card in their foreign policy assertions, while our neighborhood are our neighbors are keen to practice a strategic autonomy with us. There is a little appetite to do so vis-a-vis China. Third, in one of the least interconnected regions in the world and poor, it is natural that the inhabitants of the region will tilt towards a power with the ability to cater to their material needs, with India's ability to meet those needs being limited. China is that power. Fourth, India, for the most part, has had a normative and political approach towards the region, with the states in the region acquiescing, rebelling, and falling in line. Given the absence of choices, Beijing has changed that India-centric calculus by offering itself as the no frills, no non-normative alternative. For the first time in modern South Asian history, the region is a norm-free zone. Finally, for much of its independence existence, New Delhi enjoyed unveiled primacy in the region. Today, the downside of being the resident power in South Asia, with all its attendant cultural, ethnic, refugee, and other spillover, it felt more sharply than being the primary power. China, on the other hand, is the region's non-resident power, which benefit from the absence of complications, ethnic, linguistic, religious, arising out of being a resident power. The second cause behind India's regional dilemma is related to its policy stance, which exhibit a deep-seated status quo bias when it comes to dealing with the region's domestic politics and the multiplicity of actors centers therein, dealing only with, for the most part, those in power in the regional capitals, elected or otherwise, is perhaps the right thing to do, as well as less risky. However, such a one-track policy generates path dependencies, often alienating other centers of power or opposition leaders. Bangladesh is perhaps one such example. Furthermore, India's dilemmas are also caused by two mistaken assumptions that we have long held. For one, there has for some time have been a strong belief in India that South Asia minus Pakistan would be amenable to Indian geopolitical reasoning, which prompted an attempt to deal proactively with South Asia without Pakistan. However, in retrospect, one has to admit that this policy has not exactly panned out that way India imagined. The second mistakenly assumptions that in New Delhi approached the neighborhood with was that India's special relationship with the region rooted in culture, soft power, history, and ethnicity would help the country deal with the neighborhood better than those without intimate knowledge of the region. Namely, China has India's culture connect with its neighbors indeed become a liability in the conduct of foreign policy towards them. What can be done? To begin with, it is time India made a mental switch and acknowledged that South Asia and its balance of power has changed fundamentally. Old South Asia, where India enjoyed primacy, no longer exists. South Asia was pretty much replaced. Southern Asia, which was pretty much replaced. South Asia is a space where China has emerged as a serious contender for regional primacy. India's from neighbors and periphery are China's too. Even if we do not like it, such a realistic and pragmatic framing would help India deal with the reality as it is rather than working with the mental frame of Indian primacy, which is long gone. Second, New Delhi must proactively pursue the involvement of friendly external actors in the region. This is the only way to deal with the impending possibility of the region becoming Sino-centric. Third, Indian diplomacy must be flexible enough to engage multiple actors in each of the neighboring countries. The art of diplomacy is not about hating the India and the anti-India elements in the neighborhood, but instead uh, listening their anti-India attitude. In a similar way, dealing with whoever is in power is a good policy, but engaging only those in power is a bad policy. Finally, here is a highlighting of an issue that has been spoken of ad nauseum. India needs more hands for its diplomatic pursuit. The glaring shortage of sufficient diplomats to implement the foreign policy of a country of 1.4 billion people will improve to be India's single most crucial challenge going forward. The more India's role in world affairs grows, the more the shortage of personnel will be felt by us and others. If the current state of affair continues, there will be no one to show up with the Indian flag when opportunity, weaken or crisis emerge. Thank you.